Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Tim Treagus with us today. He is founder of Yazi, the research tool for emerging markets. He is also co-founder at Billow. That's a wetsuit. So we're going to talk about his business. We're going to talk about market research today. This pod is presented to you by podpair.com. This is my podcasting company. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to podcasts, you can go to podpair.com. Tim, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself, Yazi, and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'm based in Cape Town, which is in South Africa, the bottom part of Africa. I've been a founder of Yazi for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I founded Billow. Billow is the beach pillow business in e-commerce. So quite a big transition from going to e-commerce and sort of consumable sort of products and marketing focus to now B2B marketing. B2B market research. So Yazi is a market research software company that enables brands to connect with informal sort of market consumers in Africa and other emerging market economies like India and Brazil through the use of WhatsApp, which is quite interesting and sort of perhaps a bit foreign to people in the US because WhatsApp's only got about a 28% penetration rate of the internet population in the US. However, in Africa, sort of all of the top 6 countries are above 90% WhatsApp penetration of the internet population. So it's a really, really good channel to actually connect and engage with people.
So tell us about Billow and how Yazi came about while you were working at Billow.
Pretty independent, to be honest. Billow was a way that Billow is how I met, or how I sort of formed the relationship with my now wife. So that's an interesting thing. She actually had the concept in university to create a pillow specifically for the beach, because if you go to the beach and you lie down, typically you'll want something under your head, like, maybe you'll roll up some clothes, put them under your head, a mound of sand, or maybe your towel, some other sort of replacement thing, or perhaps you'll even take your own pillow from the couch and have it get wet and sandy and all of that. So she sort of set out to try and figure out if there was a way to create a pillow specifically for the beach that could weather the elements, and figured out that neoprene was actually pretty much waterproof. And so came up with this concept and pitched me to be her co-founder. And that was in our 3rd year of university. So then for the next 2 years in university, we built this thing up, used Alibaba to get the product made. We set sort of lots of diagrams literally on pieces of paper to them to actually make it from scratch. Product came out pretty good. We sold, a couple thousand units in South Africa, but largely actually have moved away from managing or doing any of it in the last 2 or 3 years, based on our current jobs now, and not really wanting to sort of pursue it too much further. Just in terms of capacity. However, we still really back it and are excited about sort of relaunching it. But at this point in time, we haven't really got the space to take it to where it needs to be.
And do you wish you would have had Yazi back then to do market research on the idea?
No, to be honest, I wish we had gone straight to the States. South Africa is a very small market, so we were actually paying around we're paying about the same cost to freight and import duties as the actual product cost to get it to South Africa. So if we were to get it to the States, because we were bringing it in from China, right? So if we were to get it to the States, I think the product cost would have been sort of about 30% cheaper, and we would have been able to probably charge a bit more, and the market is way bigger. So I think probably a big learning of the last couple years has been, not going to this market, because the luxury consumer segment is so small in this country. But yeah, I think, when you're young, you don't know these things, and there's a lot of hard work to actually figure out how do you build simple things like a Shopify store. So, hindsight now is obviously we're in a different place to be able to make, to have those insights. Yeah.
And do people actually need a pillow at the beach?
We have some really, really loyal customers, and we are users of the product ourselves pretty much every week. So no, it's a really not for everyone, obviously, but there's a segment of people that absolutely love this concept and relate to it in a bunch of different ways. And like the beach is one major place, but another place is going to like the rocks, going to watch the sunset, or going somewhere where you just basically want an outdoor pillow. And so then we have a lot of people that will take it to like a big picnic, or hiking or camping or that sort of thing. And people have traveled all over the world with their billows before. So we definitely have some really excited people about the product. Yeah.
And how did you do your market research to launch that one?
We were pretty lucky. We actually were able to get a sample made. It was almost like this thread of coincidences and like crazy story, but in university, Emma's my wife. She was able to get a sample pillow and was at university at the time and started using it herself. And then through using it herself, her friends started to all borrow it and take it and pick it up from the place that she was staying. So in her little sub segment or sub sample of people, there was this immediate traction and a personal like use or value of the product itself. And I think that's often, if you actually love something yourself, then that can actually be quite a good indicator, because you know that there are at least a few other people like you that will feel the same way. So we didn't do too much sort of hardcore analysis, and that obviously also being down to the fact that we were in university, but I think we knew, we sort of experientially knew that there was value there.
How did the Yazi idea came about?
The Yazi idea came about because it's really difficult to get consumer market research data in Africa, and so like so the pain points of doing a survey in Africa is that it's really expensive, it's slow. You basically have a very warped sample of respondents that will be able to answer your survey if you use a traditional digital mechanism. Like if you send your survey out on email, you're basically excluding 70 to 90% of the population who might have email but doesn't have it on their phone accessible. So there are all these sort of issues that emerge around research in Africa, and I sort of saw that WhatsApp was this very novel and interesting channel that was sort of taking form. What it was presenting in a new way commercially and in terms of commerce. And so we sort of started to look at using it as a basically a data acquisition tool. And I think like the fundamentals of WhatsApp are, you're going to have a higher response rate, which is really critical. You're going to have access to a much bigger sample of people digitally, which is around sample representation, which is the most sort of crucial aspect of research. And then you've got these other sort of like dynamics, sort of secondary dynamics, like people in South Africa and other parts of Africa have WhatsApp mobile data bundles. So they specifically have purchased to have WhatsApp. So it's actually free for them to sort of engage on WhatsApp. And often people only have 32 or 16 gigabyte phones. So if you say to someone, can you download an app? That means they're deleting a couple of videos or deleting another app. So when you sit natively in someone's phone, it's much easier for them to engage. And there's sort of a few other, like, again, secondary, third dynamics that make it really effective. But I think ultimately it's all around behavior and the fact that people are so, used to engaging on WhatsApp, and it's so simple and straightforward for them.
And what's a business model at play here? So you pay people to engage into surveys and on the other side, you have brands paying you to get data?
Yeah, so that's been our entry point. At the moment, we're undergoing quite a big transition to sell the WhatsApp research software, selling predominantly to market research agencies who, sort of a typical example would be a market research agency that's based in the UK that's doing about 40% of their research in India and other emerging markets, but is really struggling with the data collection. And so they are interested in developing a capability in WhatsApp, and is now able to use our effectively like SurveyMonkey and WhatsApp tooling to do that. So they would then actually recruit the panel and the participants themselves, but then utilize our software to actually do the data collection.
As I see, there's a setup fee of $840. Then they need to pay $300 minimum per month. Where's the ad spend in there, quote unquote, because they need a budget as well to sponsor their studies, no?
Yeah, For sure. So I mean, it's if you think of I mean enterprise market research software like Recollective or Qualtrics or Question Pro, those license fees are typically between $10,000 and $200,000 annually. So although it kind of is pricey within the segment that we are selling into, this is a pretty good price. So yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously just who the buyer is, right, in terms of what the price and the value.
Sure, but my question was more like that 300 a month and that 840 setup fee, that's yours, right? It's not to pay the respondents. Can
Oh
you
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me more about that?
Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, that's the license fee, right? There's nothing. What more
And
to say
so
is
you take that fee, that 840, that 300 a month, and you give a part of it to the respondents. Is that what you're saying?
no. That's just literally the license. That's the software fee.
And
So
they
that
have to pay an extra on top of that, right?
yeah, to the participant.
Okay,
Yeah,
because I also see that the audience, you have like the $3 per response, which is
yeah.
very fair. Survey Monkeys, how much do they charge on their end?
In Africa, it's typically about $5 to 10, 15, 20. In the US, it's more like $1 though. So the US is much cheaper, and they don't have SurveyMonkey doesn't really have many people in nations outside of Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa.
And you're only specialized in African data, right?
Well, I mean, as I said, not really anymore because the software is software. So I mean, the application and value is definitely emerging markets. So that's, South America, Africa, and then India. Those are kind of those major markets. But because we're based here, it's easier to localize, and sort of our go-to-market has been, to say that we're predominantly African, but ultimately this is a much sort of broader global play, where the software is quite agnostic to which region. Yeah.
Interesting. Um, I do cold email as a service, and I love getting stats directly like from my audience. I use this podcast also as a research tool. So I interview people, I get mental data, and then I test out these ideas at large in the market and I see market feedback. What do you think about that market researching approach?
I think it's pretty good. It's very high touch, obviously, which is cool. Yeah. I guess I don't know if you're looking for a sort of novel insight on that, but I think yeah, I think it's a good way to obviously develop rapport and then potentially, enable yourselves to sell into some of your podcast your guests, as well as maybe case studies or other anecdotes or quotes that could be, used for your marketing. So I think probably a lot of like value in how you can actually take, what you do downstream with this um, information.
Right, because you need quantity, I guess, also for it to make statistical relevance. It's mostly qualitative. I think people would qualify these podcast interview as. I tried to get that quantity, but yet maybe it lacks science. Is it normal or should it be that way that I can't often explain the insights that I get and I just get them. I have these systems, right? I have the podcast, I have the cold email outreach, I have my mastermind. I speak to a bunch of people, and then I let
Yeah.
my gut resurface these insights, and I test them in the market. Is that a good system? Is that a good approach, or should I add some stuff to it? Should I add Survey Monkey or Yazi to it?
No, I think well, number one, is your system a good system? I think it's obviously it's a good system provided that you are, you know, you're remembering things in the correct way. So assuming that you're not a very biased individual and are able to recollect information pretty well, then I think this is a solid system. Ideally, you would layer on. I mean, basically, just from the last year, this is only possible with GPT-4. Ideally, you would just layer on a workflow that analyzes the transcript and is able to sort of identify the key topics relating to your core like your core product, which is around sales and cold email. So I would definitely just set that up. So set up a workflow where you can just cluster some of the responses and start to tag and have, how this is what's predominantly being said across these these topics. Might as well, because at that point then you're able to sort of basically quantify your interviews into what might be. I mean, you told me you're doing like at least a few interviews a week, right? So that's going to amount to I don't know, a couple hundred over the year. So you might as well you could probably end up with a report in terms of your sample size and the depth of information. So I would say that you've got it covered. If you wanted to do a survey to validate this, I would say it's probably suboptimal. It's a suboptimal like mechanism to validate whether something works, because a survey is asking someone to self-report, when in reality you would typically want to find out what is someone actually doing. And that's both, you can think of that as both what have they done, and in terms of like their history, and you could figure out what their search history is, how you could do a bunch of sort of experiments and tests, or yourself. Obviously, when you do A/B tests and split testing, that's a much better indicator than just asking people, because that's the real data. Like what does it convert or not? So I think that's often an interesting point, is that when our clients come to me and say, oh, we want to know if they would like this and that, and they ask all these questions about hypotheticals, I'll often just say, well, in reality, that's not very valuable, because what people say and what people do is quite different. So rather find proxies that enable you to figure out if they would do it, or if they have done it, or just test it. And like experimenting with ads and that sort of thing is like an example of that. Yeah.
Because ideally, I'd ask like all founders all the same responses, which is why I think at an AI pod twin of Charles that would do a podcast with your AI or with your real self could be sometimes more valuable in terms of statistics. Obviously, it's not the only goal behind that podcast, market research, right? I want to connect with people. There's also leads that come from it. But yeah, you've brought up like various interesting points here, I think. Yeah, like how is yeah, sometimes I feel it's about like removing some nodes of the equation. Some people will just like tell things and will do different things like you said, but could I just speak with like one source also of data, and like they're the ultimate authority on market research in South Africa, and their feedback is worth 1,000 times more than anyone else? What do you think about that approach?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, again, like, it's not about this versus that. It's about what is the best fit for the objective that you have. So if you think of like a GLG or a Treagus as those expert interview network companies, Treagus probably being a more like advanced one that's come about in the last couple of years. Their objective is to connect someone to an industry expert who has basically, they have the top insight in the space. They know what's going on, and they can sort of tell the future in a way of like where things are going. So absolutely. But when it comes to consumer, I mean, yeah, if it comes to consumer trends, then you might speak to someone in retail or in somewhere where their inference is coming from the underlying transactional data, because they've got another source. But if they didn't have that source, then all they would be doing is sucking their thumb. So I think it's always about like there is some data at the end of the day that everyone is referencing or like
Yeah,
pulling from.
I I love machines also because they remove the bias sometimes, and I also love the fact that your app, it can help you visualize that data, right? Sometimes I don't necessarily have the right mental models to visualize the data in some way, but just seeing it on the screen in a pie chart or in a fun way can help my brain remember, my fireball brain remember these pieces of information better, and probably bring them up in further conversation. So I love the aspect of that, and I'm brainstorming with you because my main business objective in the last 10 years has been to create the business that will create other businesses, right? So some kind of market research machine infused with AI that could test startup ideas at scale and seeing what works and what doesn't. I think a lot of us ambitious entrepreneurs, we dream of that machine. How far are we from that machine existing and conquering markets at scale?
I mean, from a research front, there's probably some really good systems that are able to synthesize, like, and do desktop research and synthesize to figure out what's the opportunity. And then is because, like, I guess what is building a business? There's obviously the insight that then leads you to go and execute and build it and then sell it and commercialize. But so I think as long as that value chain can be automated and split apart into different sort of functions, then it's definitely on the way. For one thing that we are now doing that is a development from the last month, is we've developed what we're terming an in-depth or an autonomous interview bot, which instead of you scripting a finite list of survey questions, you give this agent or interview bot a set of research objectives or a research objective in general, that has a business action that you wanted to lead you to be able to take. And the agent then figures out exactly what questions to ask the participants based on that particular goal. Now, and those questions are based on responses as well. So if you say, something about you struggling with a sales rep, or this, I often get I get blacklisted when I email people in Canada or something, and they say, oh, why, the agent or the interviewer would be able to double tap and specifically focus on asking more about that one instance. So the data that we are then able to retrieve is incredibly more rich and compared to a normal survey. So I think that's an example of something that's really interesting and going to be groundbreaking in the research space. And so, yeah, I mean, that's something in for Yazi that's really exciting. I think it's going to be quite big, and that will also hopefully be able to enable people to almost outsource the discovery of ideas to a system that understands the general intent and motive and objective of the individual.
Right, because one would ask, like, why isn't Y Combinator building that at the moment? Or why, in fact, you, Tim, are not doing that? Like, have you tested some new startup hypotheses using your own platform?
I do with my clients. In terms of me, I just want to get this thing big before I focus on many other things. So yeah, so I think it's like indirectly by building for my clients, it will enable me to use it potentially, but at this point I'm just focused on the clients, and so hopefully it's circular and comes back.
Are you raising money this year? What are your top objectives?
Yeah, so we're going to be raising in May. Once we launch this autonomous interview bot, there's I think a lot that's going to happen. I've got there's a few scenarios, some really big, some more mediocre. I'm pretty optimistic that we can have some really big outcomes. So hopefully post the success of this product launch, we'll then be in a really sort of strong position to make our demands, and also have a pretty clear idea of where we're going. And so I think yeah, that's sort of that's where we're going. Yeah.
And where can people find out more about you, Tim?
Probably most active on LinkedIn. My URL, well, my LinkedIn name is Tim Treagus. And yeah, based in Cape Town. Yazi is YAZI, and I think that's it.